taste of it by now. Okay, I'm Tom Moran from the Star Ledger editorial board. I'm here with Democratic candidate for governor Phil Murphy, most considered the front runner by a long shot, with the primary coming right up. Okay, so let's go straight to some public perceptions of you.
Yep.
You're a wealthy former Goldman Sachs executive running for governor with no previous electoral experience. That raises John Corzine alarms for a lot of people, which you push back on. So
Yep.
why don't you start by just telling us how you're different?
First of all, it's good to be here. Yeah, I think people need to judge anybody, including myself, on the whole book of their lives, not just a given chapter. And I worked at Goldman Sachs and have known John for over 30 years. But as I've said a bunch of times, A-Rod and Jeter were both Yankees. It's a little bit like saying no more lawyers, as I was standing up with 3 lawyers debating the other night, or nobody else from the Assembly or the Senate. So I think it's a first pass. I think folks, in my case, I'd like them to judge me on the whole package. How I grew up working poor, public school product, worked in business for 20 years, have a lot of experience, U.S. ambassador to Germany, board member of the NAACP, former now, chair of the board of a women's shelter, started a teen helpline, chaired the original commission on pension and health care benefits, which is where you and I first met many years ago. I'd like folks to judge me sort of on an absolute test. Does this guy have the skills that we need? And that's the other point I'd make briefly, is I think we're in a break the glass moment in New Jersey. This is we need a whole reimagining of the state. And I think we've been failed by special interest politics, beginning with the governor. So somebody coming in with a fresh set of skills, a fresh perspective, I think actually is what we need, as opposed to having to defend that position. I think on offense, that's exactly what we need right now.
I'll add too, because this came up during the debates. You left Goldman in 2003, right? 5 years
Correct.
before the financial
Correct.
crisis. Still, you got a lot of blame in that debate for causing the financial crisis.
Yeah.
From afar. Impressive.
Yeah.
And you grew up not as a rich kid, but I think, as you put it, middle class on a good day.
Correct. That is correct.
So on this campaign, you've spent $18 million. Latest reports show your nearest competitor spent in the neighborhood of $2 million. Is that fair?
Are the numbers right, or do you mean it's? I can't.
No, I mean, how do you feel about the political system giving such advantage to someone with money to spend?
Listen, I can't speak about the others. I can speak about how we've spent the money and raised the money. We've put a fair amount of our own money lending into the campaign, but we've also raised a bunch of money. As I mentioned the other night, we've raised from over 9,000 people, which exceeds our high expectations wildly. And 80% or almost 80% of that group is from New Jersey, which I'm proud of. So those are the folks who are closest to it. We started, we declared our candidacy a year ago tomorrow, which is hard to believe. We were literally nobody. I mean, you would have been one of the few people in the state who's in the political arena that would have even known who I was. And we made a commitment to invest heavily in really 2 initiatives, or under 2 themes. One is grassroots activism, so we have been hyper retail, and the other is, ripping a page off from my days at the DNC with Howard Dean, is party building. In particular, not just here in Newark, where it's a blue city, but in places like Morris County or Hunterdon or Warren and Sussex County, where we have literally, as opposed to chasing elections or chasing votes, we've literally invested in party building. And that's won us some elections and won us some distinctions. I mentioned the other night, Madison is now a welcoming community. That's a big step. Phillipsburg, we have control. I think in our own small way, we contributed to Josh Gottheimer's success because the party was stronger in places like Warren and Sussex. So it's consistent with how if we rolled the tape back a year ago today and said, how do you see this? How do you see your investments? How do you see your game plan going? It's been consistent with what we expected.
Okay. And Josh Gottheimer, for those who don't know, is the new Democratic congressman who beat the arch-conservative Scott Garrett up in what counties? The northern part of the...
Correct.
Yeah. Anyway, you mentioned that we've known each other back. That comes from 2005 or 6, the Murphy Report.
5.
Known as, to contain spending on public workers and reform the pension system.
Correct.
In that, a lot of people have said that sort of presaged what Christie did, but you make the important distinction that you'd only make changes through collective bargaining with the unions, correct?
Well, if a particular action is subject to collective bargaining, I respect that, period.
Pensions are not, healthcare is,
Healthcare is, correct.
Okay. So when this bipartisan commission now says we really need to achieve savings through health care and deposit those savings in the pension, that's their core approach to this. What if the unions don't agree to the cuts in health care?
Well, they're crossing wires. That's what I get concerned about. That commission had a couple of conclusions, one of which I support and we have to accept. They claim that the pension shortfall was 100% due to the state, and the state not owning up to its obligations. And we make that point in the report that we submitted in 2005.
Right.
And I continue to make that point today. We thought that was a big hill to climb then. It's a much bigger one today. But crossing wires with the healthcare obligations, I think, is very dangerous. It's also 12 years on. I used a word the other day. I'm not sure I've used it before, but I said that at least in 2005, our recommendations, the first of which is the no more pension holidays, the state has to own up to its end of the bargain, was a symphony in the sense that this start with the state doing what it needs to do, and then you can get. I don't think it's any longer a symphony. It's 12 years on. Governors on both sides of the aisle have underfunded dramatically. The governor has said he'll put a big number in this year, but it's still a significant shortfall. I say all that because not only is health care subject to collective bargaining, it's no longer a symphony. The state has to own up to its end of the bargain before you can even talk about paragraphs 2, 3, 4. I think that's an important point to make.
Just from I see a little bit, just push back a little bit, some more shared responsibility on the part of the unions. Remember, under Donald DeFrancesco, as this was before he report, that the unions pressed the legislature and the governor to sign a 9% pension increase that was unfunded and helped create a little small piece of it. It's mainly the state. Also, when it comes to health care benefits, the unions have negotiated benefits that are better than most taxpayers have. So now that there's a call to scale that back, and there's concern among some candidates that the unions wouldn't agree to that in collective bargaining, so maybe a legal change, as in 2011, has to be made.
I see it differently.
Yeah.
With respect. I mean, I think if you take the collective bargaining is the Intel chip inside of organized labor. I think it's extremely dangerous to pull that chip out and sort of isolate it. Secondly, I have to say I've had some pretty enlightened and good, robust conversations with public sector employees around the state about trying to find win-wins. In other words, can you save money and hold your health care, or even maybe the Holy Grail, have better coverage? I think there's a collective. I think about the closing the out-of-network loophole as an example where individuals are hurt and the state budget is hurt. That's a win-win.
This is
so
loophole, so I can explain to people real quick.
Well, I apologize.
Out-of-network is when you say you have Horizon, you go to a hospital, it's not covered by Horizon. That hospital can charge Horizon unlimited funds, $50,000 for a broken wrist, and it escalates healthcare costs for all of us. Right?
You get referred to a specialist. You think you're in an in-network environment. You get referred to a specialist, and you get a bill for $15,000 or something like that. So
there's in the Democratic legislature a bill to fix that by requiring negotiated discussions on those bills.
Correct. And so that's an example where just to pick that one example where you could get at minimum the same health outcomes, if not better, and save money.
Okay. Let's talk about your most innovative idea, the establishment of a public bank. This core idea, if I'm getting it right, Phil, is you put the taxpayer money in a public bank, you use that money to lend to local businesses and provide lower-cost student loans. Only North Dakota does it now. Other states have considered it, fairly recently Massachusetts, and rejected the idea. I like the idea. As you know, we wrote in support of the idea. But I worry about the execution in New Jersey, having watched New Jersey affairs as you have for a long time, the incompetence and corruption that could leave taxpayers at risk. So how will you contain that risk?
Yeah, you got it. I think you captured it very, very well. It's been done only in North Dakota. Bernie Sanders just endorsed the idea for Vermont, the same idea that we've got here in New Jersey. It's important for folks who are watching to understand what the current reality is, and that's what we have to compare this to. I think it's a great idea in isolation, but you got to compare it to what are we doing now. Right now, there's no transparency. So this is, for the folks watching, this is a community, a county, the state itself, and the state itself is really the big one, a board of education collecting taxes or fees, putting them in the bank or investing them until they have to pay them in expenses. And so right now, a huge amount of those monies, particularly from the state, go to big Wall Street banks or they go to buy commercial paper in corporations. And believe it or not, the Coke Industries is a recipient of our state money. You have to find this in a literally, and Tom, our guys found it, but it was not easy. It's in a footnote XXX in an amendment to an addendum. So there's almost no transparency around this. So the notion would be found a bank owned by taxpayers, the People's Bank of New Jersey, for lack of a better title, and those deposits would come back and reside in that bank. And just as you said, that bank would do the business, its business entirely in New Jersey. It's almost the mirror image of what's happening today.
Right.
So these banks on Wall Street or these corporations are putting hardly any money back into New Jersey.
Right.
This would be the mirror of that. Student loans at reasonable rates, small business loans, small scale infrastructure, working with community
that's
banks.
the good part. How do you guard against the bad part that party bosses say, hey, I want a loan from my cousin who's got a new business here? And
it's in the, first of all, remember what it is today. There's nothing today that would prevent that from happening. And who knows, maybe it is happening. It would be completely transparent. It would be chartered independently. It would be governed independently. This would be a very transparent entity. The way that other entities in our state ought to be, this would have to be.
One reason other states haven't done this is the risk I'm trying to discuss here. Does that concern you that only North Dakota is? If it's such a great idea, why aren't other states doing it?
Well, first of all, the bankers don't like this idea, so they're against it, which leads me to believe it's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea to begin with. Now I know it is. We are a diverse enough economy. When you look at the amount, and this is an important point, if you look at the amount of deposits you're talking about or the potential loans in New Jersey, we are big enough and diverse enough to take that to take that amount of capacity. And by the way, the multiplier effect, of all those loans going into New Jersey and doing what I've just said, has an enormous benefit on the real economy. That's a big piece of this.
All right, let's squeeze it a little bit more. Can we clear up the record on charter schools? Do you support a moratorium on newer expanded charters, and do you believe that local school boards in Newark and Camden have the right to reject them? And I say this for context. As you know, we've been major supporters of this, but in Newark and Camden, I'm not as concerned about the successful school districts.
Yeah.
But I worry that a moratorium could undercut what at least I regard as one of the great successes in New Jersey over the last decade.
So we have been, I think, we spent a lot of time on this, as you can imagine. And I push back on the use of the word moratorium because I've got a particular history with that because I was on the board of the NAACP and they considered a moratorium, which I had concerns with because it literally, as we read it, would have cut funding off and kids would have been thrown out of school the next day, out of charter schools, and I do not support that. So I would say the way we put it is a timeout. I want to fully fund public education. That's first principle. Secondly, I've never been heck no on charters. And I've made it my business over the past year to go around and visit a ton of schools, districts, magnets, communities, charters, Renaissance. And so I've never been heck no on this. I have been heck no for the most part the way this governor's done it. Whether it's governance, dropping out of the sky, these charters, the funding issues are highly charged, demographic issues in some cases, standards of teachers in some cases. But I've been pretty clear, if a school is a high-performing school, based on all the objective facts, I'm a supporter of that, and I want to delabel that.
All right,
and I think the only thing is to say it's different. You made this point. It's different in different communities. So the Newark and Camden reality is just a different reality than Montclair, Princeton, and Red Bank.
Okay, I'll move on, but I just want to ask you, do you consider Team Academy and North Star Academies high-performing? Those are the big ones in Newark and in Camden.
Is Team Academy KIP?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, not every, for instance, their middle school results versus their high school results on testing are very different. So I don't know that I want to make a broad statement on all the schools, but they tend to be the more successful operators. It's not a black and white issue, by the way. Folks would lead you to believe that this is, and you know this, that it's an us against them thing. I think there are 19 charters I read the other day where NJEA is represented. So this is not a one size fits all debate.
Do we have a few more minutes? Okay, let's just, the last thing I want to ask about is the foreclosure crisis. You have an idea that you want Wall Street to help clean up this mess, and I gather it picks up on an idea that came from one of your competitors, Ray Lesniak. Can you walk us through that a little?
I wasn't aware that it came from Ray. I have a lot of regard for Ray, so if it did come from him, I'll give him credit for that.
I could be mistaken. I thought you said that in the debate, that I would sign your bill.
I would say I would sign the bill. I did say that. But that's not where I got the idea.
Okay.
So there were two types of foreclosed homes, and we all need to remember this. One type has people living in them,
Yeah.
and the other type is empty.
And you're not going to evict them.
No, no. In fact, we need to do everything we can to counsel them and to put all the resources we can to keep them in their homes. And we're not doing enough of that right now. And again, for the folks watching, we lead the nation in home foreclosures. We have 9% of the national stock of foreclosed homes, which is nothing to be proud of. And Atlantic County is the leading county in the country. So if you're in the house, we got to do everything we can to keep you in the house. The idea that I was referring to the other night is the homes that are empty. Mm-hmm. And the big Wall Street banks have settled in most cases with big numbers with the Department of Justice. There's money sitting there that's available, and you got to go pitch your case, make your case, and we're not getting our fair share. And if we have 9% of the nation's foreclosed homes, I think 9% of the money that's left is about $670 million.
So leaving aside whether you could really get that, whether you would have better luck with the Trump administration than Christie has, but let's say you do, and you get that money, then what?
The idea that we like the best is working with nonprofits that actually do this, and they're doing it in other states quite successfully, work with them to buy up the housing stock, and then these nonprofits then, this is what they do, they repurpose the house for affordable housing rentals. So you actually solve a couple of different birds with one stone.
Okay.
You relieve the burden of the foreclosed home stock, and we're way behind on creating affordable housing, and you instantly get a lot more affordable housing. To put some numbers, I think, as I mentioned, it's about $670 million would be our rightful amount. I think our guys think if you bought up all the foreclosed homes in Atlantic County, it's about $55 million.
Wow.
So you'd still have,
cheap.
Yeah, I mean, it's extraordinary. You'd still have, that shows you how depressed property values are.
Right.
And by the way, you know this as well. Let's say my home is foreclosed. I'm on this, and you're living beside me, and you're not foreclosed, but you're on a street with a bunch. Your options are severely limited, and prospects are severely limited as well.
Okay. There's a glimpse. This is Phil Murphy. The Vegas odds makers would say will be our next governor, but who knows? And I know they hate to say it. And he's about to now go through the tooth drilling of a full editorial board, unlike Governor Chris Christie, who hasn't had the guts to come in here for 5 years or so. So thank you for your time, Phil.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Tom.